Hi everyone, for homework this week we have our homework Flipbook. So for English we have our spelling words like we do every week. The year sixes, they are focusing on the suffix of fur, and year fives are focusing on the suffix of shun. And for our grammar section this week, we are looking at antonyms, and antonyms are words that have opposite meanings. So what you need to do is you need to add the prefix of either dis, in, I'm, or un to the following words that are listed here to make them the antonyms. So for example, satisfactory, the antonym or the opposite of satisfactory is unsatisfactory. So we would put a UN in this space here. And you need to do that for all 12 words. For maths this week, we have our multiplication grid, and you need to fill in the multiplication grid as instructed here. And then for our maths writing, we are going to be putting these questions and answering them. So we need to read each question and then work out what it's asking us to do, and then lay out the equation. Make sure we are lining up the place value columns and our decimal points, and then work out the answer. Make sure you lay out your answer and working out, please. You must show working out. For our history section this week, we are focusing on our migration topic again. So this week the comprehension is populate or perish. I'll read it now and then I'll go through the 4 questions and the back task. So populate or perish. After World War II, the Australian government was concerned about the need to develop a more sustainable economy. The catch cry was populate or perish. The government believed that if it could increase the population, the need for goods and services would increase, and this would generate more jobs and create a stronger economy. There was just one problem though. The government believed it needed to increase the population by 140,000 people each year, but only 70,000 babies were being born. So the other 70,000 would need to come from migrants. In the beginning, the Australian government looked to Britain for migrants. The Immigration Restriction Act of 1901, or the White Australia Policy, as we learnt last week, was still in place, and the government believed that British migrants would quickly settle into life in Australia. To attract British migrants, the government offered to pay the full travel fare of returned British soldiers and their families who wanted to come to Australia. For those who weren't returned soldiers but wanted to move to Australia and were committed for staying for at least 2 years, they paid most of the fare so that the immigrants only had to pay £10 for adults and £5 for children. This is where the term £10 pom came from. More than 1 million British migrants came to Australia as part of the Assisted Passage Scheme. Today, many Australians are descendants of British migrants who came via the Assisted Passage Scheme. They have played an essential part in the development of Australian society and culture. So, with listening to that, we are going to answer our 4 questions. Number 1, why was the Australian government eager to increase the population? So why did the Australian government think that they needed to increase the population? Number 2, explain what a £10 pom is. Number 3, what incentives did the government offer to entice British returned soldiers and citizens to come to Australia? So what did they give to British returned soldiers and to the citizens if they chose to move their lives to Australia? And number 4, what commitment did the government require in return for the incentive? So in return for what they gave, what you've said there for number 3, what did they need those people to commit to in return for that? So those are the 4 questions. And then our last part is a letter home. So on the back page, you are imagining that you have just arrived in Australia from England and you're going to write a letter home describing your first experiences of life in Australia. So think about how it would be different from England and what you would be experiencing. You can pull on some of your own experiences if you have migrated to Australia, or even ask your parents on what some of their experiences were when they first came to Australia. And that is our tasks for this week.